accepted the invitation. Tonight we'll get to hear from a number of people who accepted the invitation of Indigenous leaders in Minnesota to attend the Treaty People Gathering held on Anishinaabe land. This is part of the movement to stop and bridge Line 3. EcoFaith Recovery is a volunteer leadership development movement in which we lift one another up through EcoFaith's practices for awakening leadership to support our communities in taking courageous action for climate justice and racial justice. Janet Parker is an EcoFaith leader who will read our litany of welcome, which is being shared on the screen now.
Whether this is your first time participating in this gathering, or you have been coming here for a very long time, we are glad you are here. If you have felt overwhelmed, angry, or afraid in response to news of increasing climate disruptions, escalating environmental injustice and racial injustice, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. If you have found yourself burned out by one action after another done for a good cause, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. If you have been seduced into believing that you have no story that is valid, no wisdom to offer, no gifts that matter, no power to make a difference, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. If you have come to believe that you are a victim of political and economic systems rather than an actor within them, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. If you have found that your spiritual practices are not sufficiently rooting you to weather the storms of climate disruptions, environmental injustice, racial or other injustices, you are not alone. You have a place among us here. And if you feel that you have an abundance of gifts and you're bursting at the seams to use them, you have a place among us here. As we trust that God can bring us out of isolation and despair into authentic communities willing to act together, our spiritual and relational resources expand. We remember that we can organize with our communities to facilitate the diverse flourishing of life in a world embodying love for all and justice for the dispossessed. Through EcoFaith gatherings, we engage in 7 practices for awakening leadership, which include practice 1, access spiritual power. Practice 2, develop relationships. Practice 3, discover our stories. Practice 4, mentor one another. Practice 5, act together. Practice 6, reflect on our actions. And practice 7, restore balance. They are listed with other information at ecofaithrecovery.org.
Thanks so much, Janet. And thanks, Jenny Lee, for running the slides for us and all of the technology and doing so much behind the scenes work on email communications and website as well. As Jenny Lee shares a photo now from Anishinaabe land, we wanted to begin this evening's gathering with EcoFaith's first practice of accessing spiritual power, which is to consciously connect with the indwelling God, to rediscover our belovedness, our God-given power, and our place within God's evolving universe. Let's ground ourselves in the spiritual imagination we need for this work by showing up with our whole selves as best we're able to our own unique place within God's universe, which we know has been evolving for 13.8 billion years to bring us to this moment. Let's take a few deep breaths together, fully receiving the gift of air available to us right here, right now. Let's become aware of our feet on the ground And remember that beneath any flooring is earth. Every molecule in our bodies comes from this earth and her atmosphere. Perhaps we can breathe in the awareness that we are God's beloved creation, and the power of Earth's sun and the abundance of Earth's water are flowing through us. As we take 2 more breaths together within this community of creation. We remember that these places we are currently sitting are the traditional homelands of Indigenous peoples who first lived here and were forcibly removed. For example, I'm sitting in the traditional territory of the Tualatin band of the Kalapuya, who were forcibly removed to Grand Ronde. Will anybody who knows the names of the tribes or nations within whose land you live, please unmute yourselves now and say their names.
Duwamish.
Multnomah and Clackamas bands of the Chinook.
Kalapuya.
Cowlitz peoples.
Lapuya.
Valati.
As we recall the broken covenants and promises made to and with Indigenous peoples, we are reminded that we come here seeking to live in respect, peace, and right relations. By making a land acknowledgement, we are honoring the land and Indigenous heritage, which dates back in many cases over 10,000 years and continues still. May our work this evening honor the ancestors and descendants of these peoples present among us. As we seek to develop as leaders through whom God brings into being a world in which Indigenous peoples and all others are seen, named, loved, and allowed to flourish, I welcome you to unmute yourselves now if you desire to join us in the EcoFaith version of the Serenity Prayer, inspired by Black author and activist Angela Davis. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we cannot accept, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Amen.
Pass it over to Scott.
Thank you, Robin. EcoFaith Recovery Practice 3 invites us to discover our stories, to consciously recognize the power of God's presence at work within our lived experience, the lives of others, and the stories of the places we live. Together, we are learning to tell our personal stories about why climate justice and racial justice matter to us, because our stories are one of the most powerful tools we have for bringing about greater justice when our stories are offered in the service of faith and justice. Tonight, we will hear stories about what is happening with Line 3 in northern Minnesota in the Anishinaabe people's territories, and the efforts being made by the Anishinaabe peoples to protect their treaty lands. We'll discern how we may be motivated to act together, to make an impact, and to make a difference. We'll take action together for all who are interested in calling upon President Biden to revoke Line 3 permits. We'll cultivate, and finally, we'll cultivate an activated community that is ready to take future action to stop Line 3 and other fossil fuel projects to protect Indigenous people's rights. I'm delighted at this time to hand off to Peter for the program for this evening, where we will learn about the First Nations who are protecting their treaty lands, indeed sacred lands, and hear firsthand stories from those who traveled to Minnesota for the Treaty People Gathering in early June. They'll tell us about the movement to stop Line 3, why it matters, and the impact that participating in this gathering had upon them. Peter.
Thanks very much, Scott. We're going to start this section with a video from Winona LaDuke. We'll continue with storytelling, and the storytellers this evening, I think we'll go in this order to alternate traditions and voices. Will be from Meg Ruby, from Christopher Franco or Chris, from Sarah, and then from me. And with that, Jenny Lee, if you want to go ahead and run the video, that would be great.
Line 3. A lot of people want to know, and a lot of people don't know. So think of it this way. There are six really old pipelines that they put through in northern Minnesota, shipping diluted tar sands from Alberta to Superior, Wisconsin. And one of those lines is called Line 3. It has, according to Enbridge, about 900 structural anomalies in it. Structural anomalies are things like small little pinhole leaks, maybe it comes some cracks, and some of those end up to be big problems, like that Kalamazoo spill. That was a structural anomaly. Line 3, it's old and it's corroding, and it's really old pipelines that they put through in northern Minnesota, shipping diluted tar sands from Alberta to Superior, Wisconsin. And one of those lines is called Line 3. It has, according to Enbridge, about 900 structural anomalies in it. Structural anomalies are things like small little pinhole leaks, maybe it comes some cracks, and some of those end up to be big problems, like that Kalamazoo spill. That was a structural anomaly. Line 3, it's old and it's corroding, and it's at the end of its life. It's already had a number of leaks and spills, and frankly, it's a catastrophe waiting to happen. There is a likelihood that there is a whole bunch of contamination under the present line. And once that corrodes, our children and grandchildren may one day watch it drain a lake or a wetland or flood a farm field. Fixing these problems is very expensive, so Enbridge wants to abandon the pipeline, walk away, and build a brand new one in a brand new corridor. Enbridge calls this a replacement project. They're replacing Line 3. They are not replacing Line 3. They are putting in a whole new corridor and doubling the size of the line. That is not a replacement. That's a brand new line, and that's what's wrong. So we've got two problems. First, we've got a problem of the proposed new Sandpiper and Line 3 corridor through the heart of our best lakes and wild rice watersheds and through our treaty territories. We also have the problem of this old crumbling line that Enbridge wants to abandon. And right now what abandonment means is that they just leave it and walk away. And the company says that they will take care of it, but it is not clear that there is any liability from the Enbridge Corporation. The worst part is that neither the United States government or the state of Minnesota has any plan to deal with it. The good news is that the Ojibwe tribes are standing up, and a lot of landowners, county commissioners, and mayors are getting increasingly concerned about who's going to be liable for Enbridge's mess. So tell Governor Dayton to tell the state legislator, to tell county commissioners that abandonment is not what we want. We want big Canadian energy corporations to clean up their mess and not leave it for all of us. And we feel that they should put hard-working Minnesotans to work doing it. It's time to make a plan, investing in cleaning up and stabilizing our existing infrastructure and building stuff that actually serves people. Miigwech, this is Winona LaDuke.
It's really hard to add a whole lot to what Winona has said about the pipeline, but one of the ways she described her activism has stuck with me since the Treaty People Gathering, which is she spent most of her life opposing stupid projects. And this is really a stupid project. It delivers tar sands oil, which is the most polluting, highest greenhouse gas intensive fuel known to all of us. I'm sure most of you are at least somewhat familiar with where the tar sands beds are in Alberta, Canada, but they're basically in boreal forest. And the only way to get to the tar sands is to deforest the area and then essentially to mine the deforested area like you would mine for minerals or for other things that are buried in the ground. And so large areas are basically completely destroyed. Ecosystems are altered essentially forever. And Then the stuff that comes out of that is basically like sludge or asphalt. It's a very heavy form of petroleum. It's very corrosive. And in order for it to travel through pipelines for refining, it needs to be shipped with some forms of diluent or thinners that allow the tar sands to flow. And that diluent is highly toxic, as is the tar sands. And as Winona said in the video, it's for certain that the 60-year-old pipeline has leaked, and there are numerous places on that pipeline route that are polluted. And it's also true that the new pipeline, for however long it runs, will eventually leak as well. That's what pipelines do. But the other part of this that's just stupid is how it relates to climate change. So cutting down forests creates greenhouse gas emissions in a form. Mining out the tar sands creates lots of greenhouse gas emissions. Transporting them creates greenhouse gas emissions. Refining them creates greenhouse gas emissions. And ultimately burning them creates lots of greenhouse gas emissions. And we're at a point where we can't keep emitting greenhouse gases. We have to be reducing them. And by building projects like this, which are nominally designed to last for 30 years, but as we've seen with the existing pipeline can last 60 or 70 years, that's committing a lot of resources and a lot of money to essentially making this a legacy polluting source of greenhouse gases, and one that if Enbridge has its way would last for at least 30 years and likely more. So with that as sort of general background, where the project stands now in terms of the legal permitting is that all the permits have been issued, all the processes at the state level have kind of run their course, and all the things that Enbridge needs to build the project have happened, and they are building the project or trying to build it right now. And that's why this summer is so important. The Treaty People Gathering was a way to call attention to the urgency of the moment, to ask President Biden to withdraw the permits that the federal government has issued that allow the project to go forward. And to date, many of us have been asking him basically every day through social media and through the White House website to stop Line 3. He hasn't really spoken to it yet and certainly hasn't stopped it. And so that's the pressure that we need to keep bringing to bear on the president and the White House. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to the storytellers and have Meg go ahead and share with you her story about her experience at the Treaty People Gathering.
I have a few photos that I chose to share that somebody maybe can help me how to do that screen share. I'm forgetting. So I've selected them, but if you all, go ahead.
Can you see at the bottom of the Zoom screen, there's might be a green button that says share screen?
Yes.
Okay, so click that, and then you'll want to click on the specific window with your photos.
Okay, I'll go back. I'm going to unclick that for a second. Maybe I'm not going to do that. I think I'm going to bog down in that. I think what I want to do right now is just say a few things about why I had an immediate yes to the invitation to consider to go. Briefly, I think it has to do with stories, and I forgot what the wonderful thing is that I love the most about EcoFaith is how intentional our language is. And I'm like, I want to come back. It's so wonderful. But the stories that we tell ourselves bind us in, connect us, or they separate us, and they can allow us to fall into falsehoods and can give us reasons to not do the right thing. And I think that there's so much of that going on with Line 3. And also, I think the stories of who we are and are we called to this place? Was it given to us? Those are the sorts of things that pioneering white people tell stories all the time. I have a story of my people. They came in through Wisconsin, they're Norwegian. They were indentured servants who basically got a moment to leave, and they did, but they arrived at the beginning of winter. And it was rough. And there's all those stories that many of us have. In addition, I know that looking back, that American policy explicitly targeted bringing immigrants in at certain times to help push Native Americans out of lands that they wanted to occupy. And I believe my family played that role twice, at least that I know of, in the last territory to open up, which was in Kansas, and then in the Midwest area. So I felt a personal connection to why white people were there, because some of them were my people. And but also I was interested in all the little bit that I'd seen from the invitation, the storying about we are treaty people. And the fact is, our people signed those treaties that recognized that deals were made and lands were protected. And so we are still on the hook for that, I believe. So that's something I want to continue to live in. And then I think the time together that we had at the camp, and there was so much behind the scenes excellent work that allowed intense connecting and sharing that I just can't even do justice to, but just to know my hat's off to all the folks. And Sarah, I know you were maybe involved in some of that, but at the Northern Pines camp, we got a chance to hear each other's stories, and it really expanded my sense of the we who was there, both in terms of the faith groups that were there, the ethnicities, et cetera. And that time together, part of me felt like, oh, we should be out on the front line, but I think it was very important to give a sense of who we were as a community. It was really beautiful. And I have some images from that, and if I can get them up, I'll share them. So, and then the last thing was, who are we listening to? And I made an early decision that it wasn't like I was trying to get arrested, but I was just gonna follow what the women leaders were doing. So when Everlasting Wind said, I'm going this way, I followed her and just did what she did. And different people took different choices. And I think strategically, none of the well-regarded local women leaders were arrested. I think the police did that on purpose to not engender sympathy. But there we were standing in the headwaters, and little things were nibbling on my feet, and it was like fish or crawdads. I don't know what they were, but so I would just say that the storying that we tell about who we are and how we fit into this situation is really important. A lot of people said, I can't believe you came so far away. Why are you here? And to me, it feels like a very intimate connection to what's happening there and wanting to stay connected to it. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meg. Chris is going to go next. And if you look in the chat, you'll see that Chris is putting up his Patreon. And Chris is a filmmaker and photographer and documentarian and journalist, and has done amazing work bringing attention to these actions. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Yate, can you hear me?
Yes.
Huh? I'm just coming back from the governor's mansion in Salem. We're over here with we're in Minnesota too, and they're trying to. The young people were asking the governor to live up to her promises that she made when she was when she became governor, I guess. But the first time I went up to Minnesota, I was trying to get there before COVID, and when COVID happened, you know, I lost my chance. Trying to get up to Canada to Tiny House Warriors too. So what I do is I shoot video. I take black and white pictures, photography, and 35mm film or 120 film. And today, you know, I've just been like doing a lot of digital pictures, photographs. So that's what I like doing. I studied at Portland State and New York City for filmmaking and photography playwriting. And I graduated in 2013 at PSU, and so I'm trying to be a part of the change that's happening all over Turtle Island, all over the world. And I always go back to the prophecy by the Cree Hopi people. I think it's Cree or Hopi that said that Rainbow Warrior prophecy that they're going to rise up at the end, and they're going to, you know, I believe that they're going to take the system down. And everything that I heard here, we're restoring, you know, indigenous land back to indigenous people, and protecting the water, and, you know, defending the land, the trees, the fire, the air, the water, you know, the animals, and the ones that fly, the ones that swim, and even the one dansei, you know, the one that grow, you know, the vegetables, and, you know, the plants that grow on this land where Mother Earth provides for us. And the land acknowledgement that they just said a while ago, those ancestors were had a relationship to the land. And so today we still have a relationship to the land, and we're still here. We haven't gone anywhere just because we don't ride horses or wear feathers or buckskin or whatever, you know, that people have in the idea of American Indian. You know, we're still here. We're still alive. I'm still here. You know, I still speak my language, and, you know, that was our resistance when we were at the boarding school when I was growing up there. And I had to go to school, and they try to put me through that brainwashing system, but they never broke my spirit. I'm still here, still doing what my grandmother told me to do. The matriarch society on the res, you know, it's still alive in Minnesota. You know, got Winona LaDuke, you know, you got like Tara Huska, you know, and a lot of the indigenous people, you know, the women, you know, they're up at the front lines now, and they're taking their rightful place in this society, this matriarch. They want a matriarch society. It's what I want to. It's what we want, to honor our women again, because so much they've been abused and put down and, you know, oppressed. So they're rising to this, and the time is now. You know, it's their time to rise with the rainbow warriors all over the world, with different walks of life coming together, standing up and protecting this Mother Earth, this planet, because we don't have no other place to go. You know, like the rich people are going to the moon or Mars or somewhere. I don't know where they're going, man, but they're making all these rockets and they're trying to get there. But we're still going to be here. I'm going to still be here. So I got to fight for clean water and for our future generations, the next generation. For those yet that are not born yet, that are still, you know, not here yet, we have to prepare that space, that safe space for them to come into this world. So that's why I went to Line 3, and I went the first time I went. I got arrested twice. The first time I went with XR. I went with XR, and there was a lot of on the way. We went through our own journeys, you know. And there's different culture, you know, ways that we do it. You know, I try to talk about prayer with them. You know, we got up early in the morning one day, and it was in Theodore Roosevelt National Park. I remember that in North Dakota. We stayed there for the night. Went up that hill right there, and it was a beautiful sunrise. And we laid down some offerings and prayers for the land, you know, for the animals and everything, the universe, yeah, you know. And so we went through the journey together, you know, understanding how I think, how, you know, how I matter, you know, like Indigenous people, we matter too. You know, the Black Lives Matter, and you know, everything matters because we all have a relationship to this land. And the food supply, the wild rice matters because you can't take your garden hose out there and water the, the, the plants, the rice. It's wild. The only way it gets water is from the rain. And so if that's desecrated, if that's, you know, oil and tar sands, mercury and arsenic, whatever it is that they mix to make that tar sands oil, is if it gets into that wild rice, that's going to be it. That's there's no way, you know, you're going to clean it off. You know, it's going to be in the water. So the next year's wild rice season is going to be pretty much polluted. So the food supply is very important to us, you know. So we have to really fight for it. That's what I believe. That's why I went, you know, enough to where I was arrested, and also to educate the non-natives, because a lot of them, they didn't understand like our way of life, and we're still here, still having that relationship our ancestors had with the land. And we have sacred sites everywhere, and we have food supply everywhere. Right now, I'm down at Thatcher Pass. I put inside the chat room, I put my Patreon and put that video that I shot down there while I was in Thatcher Pass. I can't go back to line 3 because I've already been arrested twice. So I'm going down to Thatcher Pass, which is closer to Oregon, and you know, they're mining lithium. And so I'm down there helping shooting video, and the first time I was arrested with a two-spirit person named Otto, and was the first time I really kind of stood up for the two-spirit people. Because when we're in jail, you know, it's like, you know, the people inside there were, you know, mistreating him, saying things to him. You know, the inmates were saying all kinds of stuff to him. And from the cell I was in, we could see what was going on outside with the guards and Otto and stuff. And so the second time I went was with the prayer group, and we went on our own journey too. We went on our own journey, and we all bonded together, and we all, you know, had kinship together, and we all had prayer together too. A couple of times where we slept at, we all got out of our tents, and you know, T-Bro sang some songs, and you know, I shared a little bit about why it's important for us to have prayer all the time. So it is in Agenjurada. That's what my grandmother used to say, that you can't go without prayer, you know, and you can't go without song. So so it's very important that I be there, you know, building relationship with other non-natives and learning from them. And so that night we stayed at that one place where people were out in the waters praying and stuff. And I'll post some pictures that I've taken in the chat room, if that's the place where I'm supposed to post them. So the next day we went, some people went to the headwaters of Mississippi and did some prayer. And then there's some of us that were arrestable. So we went down where the pumping station was, and it was really hot. And, you know, there's a lot of water. There's a lot of support, people bringing in, you know, food and water and stuff for us. And then a helicopter came, and, you know, the propellers made a lot of dust. And I was right in the middle of that. You know, I shot a video, so I'll post that too later in my Patreon. So I'm trying to fund myself that way. And I shot a lot of video, took a lot of nice pictures, and so this kid came up to me and he was like, "Hey man, you want to check out this barricade we made?" I said, "Yeah, let's check it out." So we walked over there. There was this one opening. There was an opening. There's like a tin fence all the way around, and we occupied that space, at that time when we went over there to check out this his barricade he made. Just by that time, when he was getting ready to show it to me, um, the county sheriff and the cops rolled in, and so the buses, they came in a bus and a small bus and a long bus, and it was so funny, how the universe put me in that right spot. And I took out my camera and I started taking pictures, I start shooting video with my cell phone, and they came really fast. They came because that helicopter, the reconnaissance, they found out where the opening was. So that was the opening right there. And they knew where to go. So as soon as they rolled in there, they came real fast, and they pointed at that guy that's standing next to me because we're all locked in, locked arms. And they pointed at him and they went like this. And I could see him tightening up my arm, and I was tightening up we're all like really tight because now they were coming for us. He said, "We're going to start with this guy." So he's the first one to get thrown in jail, and I was the next one. And I kind of wrestled with them a little bit and trying to take us apart. My arm, they bruised my arm up, and this thumb right here, this thumb, the one on my left thumb, it still hurts. It's still uh, not all healed yet. And they threw me down on the ground, and as soon as I went down on the ground, I could feel like 10 knees on my back, one on my almost by my neck. And so they picked me up and they put me in the back and sat me down for a little bit, and then they started putting us in these paddy wagons, and they took us all the way to the county jail. They took our names and stuff. They put some ice on my thumb, and then they threw us in jail, and they put me in with another cell, another guy that was from one of the groups from Vermont, and then we went to court, and so I got two charges now. Two times. First time I was arrested. The first time I went up. The second time I was arrested again. And so it's real for us to fight for our relatives. We're warriors. And so we have to keep standing up in order to change things. It seems like we have to. The laws that they have, it's already like been set, and the only way that you try to go by the environmental impact statement, they don't even go by those anymore. So all the court systems that they went through, they tried to do it the right way, didn't work. So the only thing we can do is lock down, get arrested. That's all we have left today, this time, this year. It's all we have. There's no other way to do it, and we have to do what we have to do by all means necessary. So nonviolent direct action is that's what I do, and I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'm just believing in the universe, because that's our power. The man-made laws, it doesn't really have power. It only has a power to a certain amount. It's the lightning and the clouds and the rain and the rivers. That's power. Natural power, natural law. So that's what I stand on. The universe is going to help me, help us take back the land, help us help the future generations that are coming after us, because, you know, they need a safe place to be born into. And the ones that don't have no voice can't really do anything. You know, they can't go to the courthouse or line 3. They're just growing all over the place. You know, all these trees, you know, they communicate with each other in their own ways and their own communities. And the animals, you know, they don't have a say so. They're the ones that are going to be drinking the water too when that's polluted. They don't have a say so in that. They just drink it, then they're, you know. So a lot of that's why I'm up there. That's why I went. You know, I'm the Navajo. We've been doing this down in the Southwest. We shut down a power plant down there. And Peabody coal mine, back in the day, the elders were crying and needed help. So we answered the call back then when we were young kids, little ones, still in boarding school. American Indian movement came and schooled us about our ways and what we need to do as a warrior society. It was either the boarding school where you're being abused and you're being broken down to be a citizen, or it was American Indian movement where everything was natural to do what we needed to do to defend the land, to protect Mother Earth. So I chose to do that, to protect Mother Earth with American Indian movement. So ever since then, you know, that's what I've been doing. I've been like a land defender and water protector. And it gives, you know, the culture. My culture is my salvation. That's what's going to save me. That's what's going to save the planet. It's going to save our land. Is our culture and our languages and our ceremonies and our ways of life, to how we used to live back then when they had a relationship with the land. Our ancestors, the people that they just named off, the land acknowledgement, those ones, they had a relationship. And it was passed down to us orally through our ceremonies and our songs that we sing today. So we're still connected to Mother Earth through our umbilical cord that was buried inside Mother Earth. And so we're still connected, and she still provides for us. And we're still standing up to fight for the next generation to come. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Really, really appreciate your words and your story. We're going to go next to Sarah. So Sarah, you can jump in. Thanks.
Yeah, it's an honor and also a bit intimidating to follow you, Chris. But I will do my best. I'm going to share some photos, actually. A minute here. Let's see, I don't know. Can you see the photos on there? Can someone give me a thumbs up? Yeah, okay, great. I'm gonna start here. So my name is Sarah and I live in Portland, Oregon, on the traditional homelands of the Cowlitz and the Clackamas peoples. But I was actually born in Minnesota near the shore of Lake Superior, or Gitchigami, as it's known by the Ojibwe or the Anishinaabe people. And that's a large part of what pulled me to say yes to participating in the gathering last month. And while I was born in and lived nearly half of my life in so-called Minnesota, the truth is I was so disconnected in every way from its land and waters, and especially from the Indigenous peoples who first called this beautiful, beautiful place home. So attending the gathering for me was really deeply personal. And it was part of an ongoing process of coming to terms with the fact that growing up as a first generation white Christian Minnesotan, I was not just passively disconnected from the lands of my birth, but I'm an active beneficiary of those broken treaties and of our collective overconsumption of carbon, which obviously threatens not just the Indigenous peoples and relatives of so-called Minnesota, but people around the world. So attending the gathering was also part of a long journey, hopefully, of repair. And for me, of starting to really listen in a new way and to learn from the region's lands and waters and its first peoples and our other than human inhabitants and relatives. But as I mentioned, I now live and raise my 2 young kids here in Portland, Oregon, where I've lived since 2004. And my primary work and movement home here is as an organizer with the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice or Emerge, where I get to accompany communities and people of faith and fierce love to advance immigrant and racial justice. So another of my intentions in attending the Treaty People Gathering was really to be able to weave together a more interconnected movement and to share back the stories and experience of the fight to stop Line 3 with my communities and with movements here. And I know that the struggles for climate justice and Indigenous sovereignty are so inextricably linked, right, with the struggles for immigrant and racial justice. But I think one of the things that was so powerful about this trip was to experience that and the recognition of that sacred interdependence of our communities and of our movements, again, in such an embodied way at the gathering itself. You know, leaders and elders at the mic trace the connections between the lives and the stories of the children whose buried remains had been recently discovered at the residential schools in British Columbia, and connected those to the lives and the stories of the children being held in cages on the southern border of the United States, many of whom are from Indigenous communities in Mexico and Central America. And it's also not lost on me, you know, the photo on the right there is from Customs and Border Patrol. And it was a US Customs and Border Patrol helicopter that came down that Chris was referencing before. It's not a coincidence. And also Anishinaabe leaders at the gathering connected their struggles to those of the Mapuche people who are defending the forests and rivers and the land in Chile, and the Yakama Nation here that's working to protect their other than human relatives in the Pacific Northwest. They were weaving those connections, understanding that interconnectedness. And in this final set of photos, you can see a wooden platform or boardwalk that goes out to the Mississippi River at one of a couple of spots where the Line 3 is slated to cross the Mississippi. And at one point in the gathering, I don't know how many of us, Meg, maybe 100 of us or so people accompanied a group of Indigenous women out to that boardwalk where they were planning to hold a 4-day prayer ceremony. But the way that they chose to open that space was by first naming and holding space and offering prayers for the families of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And they said, your families, you have suffered the violence of the state and the police, and so have we. And there was just something about the Indigenous women that we had the gift and honor of accompanying that day, that they offered such a beautiful and powerful witness to, again, sort of that sacred interdependence, that water is memory, water is life, and all life is sacred. And it just felt so clear to me in that moment, standing in that river, that the future of our movements and the success of our movements hinges upon that ability, our ability to embrace that interconnectedness and to get out of our issue silos and communities and invite more and more of our relatives into this sacred work of building a world where life can flourish for all. And so, yeah, to wrap it up, I just, there's so much more to share, but I left that gathering just more resolved than ever to be a part of participating into being that world. And I'm excited to invite and walk alongside all of you in that work as well. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm going to go very briefly with my story, and then just for the folks who are following along with the script behind the scenes, what we're going to do after my story is we'll go into breakout rooms, I think for maybe 10 minutes, where we can talk in smaller groups about these stories and our reactions to them. We had originally planned to do a brief action of calling the White House and asking the president to stop line 3. I think we'll skip that to try to do that within this context. It's just going to be too jarring a transition, I believe, from the stories. But we will urge you to do that on your own after this gathering. And it's a very easy thing to do, and we can give you instructions on how to do that. So very briefly for my story, I'm going to try and share my screen to see if I can figure out how to do this. And I just want to show one picture that's just real similar to one that Sarah's got going. Can you all see that? Yeah, so this is the edge of the Mississippi River crossing. And as Sarah mentioned, there are these wooden platforms that were built to support the heavy equipment that is used to drill under the Mississippi River to install the Black Snake in this sacred space. And as you see off into the distance, there is a basically 100-foot wide swath of destruction that goes on for hundreds of miles. You have to kind of imagine how awful that is in scale. It's hard to see on a little picture on a computer screen or a phone, but it is a mammoth affront to nature. And so when we're doing projects like this as a culture and society, we're making this commitment to alter the earth in ways that are effectively permanent. And one of my calls to participate in Minnesota was having past experience around pipelines and utility corridors and knowing what they do and knowing that pipelines leak, knowing that pipeline construction is incredibly destructive. And of course, that's proved to be true. Already there have been incidents during construction where safety standards have been ignored, where environmental permits have been violated, where rivers have been compromised by poor construction. And it's inevitable that those things happen. And so when we make these decisions to build stuff like this, we're taking on all that risk and all that long-term damage and harm and imposing that effectively on all generations to come. And that's a justice issue that just sits wrong with me now. You know, going back to Winona LaDuke's frame for this, it's stupid. The other part about this for me, which is really different, is the spiritual and faith that everyone brought to our group. As Chris mentioned, we took time out to pray together. We were not and are not of all the same traditions, but we found what we had in common. And what is most powerful for me and one of the hardest things to live into from our sacred texts is the idea that we are all connected, the idea that there is no us and them, there is only us. And us is not just humans, it's all of creation. It's all the life that you see in this picture, noting there are no humans in that picture. And so I think in the Western tradition, in certainly my faith tradition, we don't always value experience. And I would just say that it's so important to go have experience and to honor the feeling and the reality of your body's reaction and your body's experience to participating in actions like this and to making a connection to your sacred traditions in protecting land and in being hurt by the destruction of land, you know, to own that and to live into that. So with that, I'm going to stop and open us back up into the next phase of the script, if I can figure out how to do all that stuff.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you, all of the storytellers, Peter, Meg, Sarah, and Chris. I thank you so much for your witness here today with us. And we're behind schedule, but I want to do something completely countercultural. I want to take a minute of silence to just sit with these stories and honor this witness here today. So let's take a moment of silence and I'll bring us back together in prayer. Creator God, God of grace, creator of this universe, the universe that is the source of all power. We thank you for all of the women, Indigenous leaders who are leading this resistance and putting themselves at great risk to protect their lands and to protect our lands, our land, and our waters. We thank you for the witness of these 4 people who took the opportunity and the risk to join the Treaty People Gathering. We ask your blessing on all here today and ask for your power and blessing as we continue to protect our Mother Earth. Amen. EcoFaith Practice 2 engages us in developing relationships to consciously awaken the power among that arises when we engage in authentic conversation and relationship. We'll now go into Zoom breakout rooms for 10 minutes and have a group discussion about what from these stories shared by the storytellers connected with your own story. We can also ask additional questions that might support us in the ways that we may each be led to take action. Being grounded in our own story about why this matters will bring much greater power to the story we share and to the testimony that we make to President Biden and all of our leaders. Jenny Lee, if you could take the time to send us into breakout rooms and then we'll come back. Okay, it looks like we're all back. I think I'm going to suggest we just take about 4 minutes as we regather. And if there's anything of special significance that emerged from your conversation as a group, please unmute and share it with the group. Anyone like to break the ice?
Well, we were talking about having conversations about these issues with family members who have different perspectives, and the emotional and spiritual work that is.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. Meg, did you have something?
Yeah, I want to say that what we're doing right now is so rare, to take a very intentional look and listen and reflection. And I'm coming back to these practices with new eyes because I've been not participating for a while. And I feel like, what would be different if we did this throughout our society and I think we wouldn't embark on so many disastrous things, and we would have more time at home with our loved ones. I mean, just the ripple effect. But also, I would just say that I'm really grateful to EcoFaith for making this possible, and for Peter for organizing us. And I got to hear stories through other people's eyes, and that really is powerful. I think that we were there was very powerful, and that we're talking about it here now, and what happens next could be very impactful. So I think we're on this knife's edge, and I think we need to really be intentional. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. One more? We have one more?
I mean, I've talked a lot, but I will just want to express gratitude for Chris and Sarah and Meg for their stories. And particularly just resonating with me was Sarah's connection of this story to immigrant justice and to racial justice, and calling back to me the George Floyd honoring in the space, and of our collective intention to go to George Floyd Square and being unable to do that, mostly because our comrades were being held in prison for more time than they should have been held in prison. And so one of the things that we had hoped to do was to go to George Floyd Square, and we were unable to do that largely because of the way that the police behaved in terms of incarceration. So that was a loss that I still kind of feel, and just recalled that differently with Sarah's story. So I appreciate hearing that.
Thank you, everyone. Robin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody. And I really want to echo the expressions of gratitude to Chris and Sarah and Meg and Peter for just sharing some of just a little bit of this experience, but such powerful windows into it. And thank everybody for just dwelling in this practice 3 of discovering our stories, and also in this practice 2 of developing relationships with one another through our stories. We, our partners in this are Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon and Green Faith, and Green Faith had envisioned these gatherings as an hour of action. And I think what we've kind of organically discerned together is, yes, the action is important, and knowing why we're acting, being grounded in our stories, in our worldview, in our spirituality is really important. And it seems like we've organically discerned today to just spend a little more time dwelling there. So Jenny Lee will be sending out an email, and she'll have the calls to action that Green Faith is encouraging us to engage in. They are calls to President Biden. If she wants to, she can drop a couple of those links into the chat yet tonight. Up to you, Jenny Lee. One has to do with signing a petition, and another has to do with making phone calls to just keep the pressure on President Biden to make a different choice. There's also an opportunity here for us to think about other ways that we want to share this with our communities. So within EcoFaith, we engage in these practices not only to motivate or to find the motivation for our own action, it's also so that we can equip ourselves to be better leaders who can work with our communities. So we're not acting alone, but we're acting together, so that we're not in our story alone, but we're sharing stories with others too. So this video will be available also. If you want to share some of it, sit with a group and share some of it, and then reflect further on your own stories with others as well. We also like to use it with every opportunity as one for learning and growth. And that brings us to practices 4 and 6. Practice 4, mentoring one another, states that we consciously draw out the gifts, wisdom, and life-giving power of others and share our own by mentoring and being mentored. And practice 6, reflect on our actions, states that we consciously reflect upon and evaluate our actions and the ways we use power in order to learn and grow into mature and courageous leaders. So in the interest of our mutual leadership, growth, and development, I welcome anybody right now to unmute yourself and share aloud any of your reflections regarding this gathering, particularly noticing how, spiritually grounded, relationally connected leadership development was facilitated or is being facilitated among us, and ideas about how we could do that even better at future gatherings that any of us may have anywhere. Feel free to unmute and share now.
So I think this is Michael Human, and just the act of planning this and inviting the voices from people who are in our communities to share the experiences that they had with those of us who were not able to or did not go to bring that closer to home, to raise that up to our consciousness. As I was mentioning in our breakout group, I think one of the big things that the company and the government doesn't like is bringing attention to this, is bringing to light how it is that these resources are being taken from the earth and how the earth is being despoiled in their transfer and their transportation. And so making this available to a larger audience is real important. And I think that I'd like to see more of those. Thank you.
I really want to thank you, Peter. What many people aren't aware of is how far we diverged from from the script that we had intended. And I think for all of us, a lot of times, like, leadership is really that discernment in the moment. You do your best to make a solid plan that's going to honor people's time and help cultivate a space that is going to be helpful. And then it's what happens in the moment, and it's being able to listen. And I texted Peter, okay, I know we're off schedule, we could make a different decision. And interestingly, Peter, you did not message me right back. You said okay. And Peter took, it appeared to me you took about 10 minutes actually to make a call, and I'm guessing you were kind of listening, and you got this clarity, like, we need to stay with these stories. That's what we need to do tonight. And I really respect that. And I learned something from it tonight. So thank you. Anyone else have anything you want to share?
Well, as always, I want to thank Jenny Lee for all the tech and all the help set up and getting the word out for this. And for all of you for being here. Again, I really appreciate the spiritual work involved in this. And this was kind of going back to our breakout group a little bit and a part of my story. But I think it was 4 years ago or so that the Collins lecture was Wounded Earth, Wounded Humanity was the theme. And I thought a lot about that listening to Chris's story, particularly, and the idea of wounded humanity. It's really the dominant culture that is wounded and that is wounding humanity. And dealing with our history and our part in that, and stepping outside of the main culture and looking at main culture critically is so difficult to do. And I really appreciate that everybody here and everybody who will watch this recording is willing to take that on and to try that. It's courageous. And so again, I just kind of want to thank everybody for being in the space.
Thank you, Peter. If others have things you'd like to share, feel free to stick around afterwards. I'm happy to stick around for a little while if there's other things you want to talk about. If any of the storytellers are willing to be contacted by anybody who might like to think about going to Minnesota and are willing to put your contact information into the chat, please feel free to do that. And for any of you for whom this kind of space is helpful to you, please know you are always welcome to join EcoFaith Leaders on Thursday mornings from 8:45 to 10:15. It's every week. And you just sign up at the ecofaithrecovery.org website, and you get the link sent right to you. And on fourth Thursdays, we spend an hour of that time joining the Red, Black, and Green New Deal Allies Gathering. And that's new for us. And it's 1 hour every month where we're taking our cues from Black-led climate justice leaders with the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. So next Thursday, that'll be 1 hour of the hour and a half that we spend together. Janet is now going to lead us in practice 6, Restore Balance.
All right.
Practice 7. I hope I said practice 7. That's what I should have said.
Okay, yes, practice 7. Restore balance, practice 7, engages us in consciously realigning our lives with the sacred and natural rhythms of life expressed through the whole of God's creation. It is the goal of all of the practices and all of our actions. I just want to add that in our small group, Scott pointed out how many of the practices he, in a sense, was hearing in Chris's story, that there is some synchronicity or harmony between some of the EcoFaith practices and some ancient and still continuing Indigenous practices. And I want to just lift up that restore balance is definitely one of those. So at this point, I welcome you to please type an intention into the chat box as to how you will work to restore balance during the coming week, whether that be personally, interpersonally, within the community, or within the public arena. Some beautiful intentions are coming into the chat. I invite you all to read those. We won't take the time to read them aloud, but thank you all for these intentions.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks a lot for that. Thank you, everybody, for just reflecting on that a little bit. We want to honor one another's time. So as we prepare now to go forth from this gathering, may we always remember that we are not alone and that it is not all up to us. May we remember that we are called to be faithful, regardless of whether we are successful, and that we indeed are one small but miraculous part of God's evolving universe. We close by again consciously engaging practice 1, accessing spiritual power. Please bring to the front of your consciousness whatever has been stirring on your heart or in your mind as you have shared in this time of spiritually grounded storytelling and reflection. I welcome you to join me in taking just a couple deep breaths as we consider what matters to you from the stories shared tonight, and what are you feeling called to do about it? As we pray that God will empower us to take action together that is most needed in our world, and to cultivate the kind of grounding that we need. Will you please unmute yourselves and join me in a moment of silence, followed by the EcoFaith version of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we cannot accept, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, everybody, and a special thank you again to our storytellers. You may obviously feel free to go on your way, or feel free to stay and talk further as you desire. Blessings.